So today I will be discussing a little bit about how to actually create the dazzling and ubiquitous payment experiences, and how to unlock maybe innovation beyond actually doing an incremental innovation, which is often the case when we talk about payments. A little bit of a background on myself, so you know who's that bold guy trying to be smart up front. I used to, for the past 10 years, and actually here isn't Danske Bank, so it's so long time ago, funny enough. But used to of course work nowadays. I had Vipps MobilePay here in the Finnish market, also heading our open banking section of the payments team within the group. Have been working on building, for example, the largest e-commerce payment service still in use on top of cloud. Nowadays part of Paytrail, but back in the day was part of OP. Heavily involved in mobile payments, of course, which I present nowadays as well due to my daily work. But have been working on mobile payments already when there wasn't actually NFC payments fully on the market when I worked back in Elisa. Nowadays, of course, that's probably the biggest topic that we're going to also touch today. So how does the actual in-store landscape change now in the next coming years? The perspectives that I'm putting on the table are coming from this perspective. So I'll not talk about company per se, but I will try to approach this from a Nordic perspective, obviously presenting the largest mobile wallet in the Nordics by numbers, both in a user base and in transactions. And that's what we are with MobilePay nowadays, present in the 4 Nordic countries. So 3 things for you to learn as it is now with the new president. You know, 3 things trendy to take into. 3 things for you to consider. I'll touch a little bit on what does actually dazzling and ubiquitous mean in a payments world. I'll look at, okay, what are the actual options for the future if we look at Finland? How does the market develop? So I was kind of expecting Tommy to be also looking at a high level, so I'll try to put it on a more a little bit more concrete, which is good. I think that's Tommy your job to initiate the workshop today, and then I'll discuss a little bit about the experience of building payments within a corporate, within I would say a scale up of a corporate. What are the things that you actually need to look at when you want to create disruptive payments innovations, especially from a Finnish market perspective? So first off, what does actually dazzling mean for me? And it means basically 4 things. First off, you really need to solve a real problem. Good example is, as Tommy mentioned, the wallets on the back pockets of every 40 to 50-year-old guy in this room, more or less. Both in terms of how it looks, but in terms of actually making it convenient. Not maybe like as I myself as well carry a card holder, which and a lot of the card holders have been sold by. It's actually safe, so it's guarded from a magnetic strip, so nobody can actually read the back pocket with the payment terminal. I don't know how many of you have had that experience. Probably not so many. So looking at solving the real problems. The second, of course, being that it needs to integrate into users' daily life. And that's what, for example, mobile payments is. Contrary to maybe going to an ATM, stopping your life and getting cash and then being able to use that cash later on. So it needs to be well integrated. Of course, it needs to be seamless and secure. And we as a company as well, we've done fuck ups in the past for sure. Using a Bluetooth was one of them. I can really state that at this point. So it really needs to be robust 24/7 when you're talking about payments, and very easy to use and work. And that, for example, NFC obviously now presents that at the moment. And lastly, if you can, you should surprise both the user and the crowd. So I've been using a payment ring and today I don't have it because it's actually in my golf bag, like also with my wedding ring, funny enough. But that's been one of the things. If you want to start a discussion with the Prisma sales representative, try paying with the payment ring. That probably gets the attention normally. So how you can actually create that positive vibe and a surprise in your peers. The second thing is actually ubiquitous. And I was, my voice today actually, as you might hear, it's a little bit of couple octaves below. I've been having the worst man flu mankind can have in the past 2 weeks. and I've been trying to pronounce ubiquitous myself, so it's a little bit of a hard word for Finns. But what does actually that mean? So it means that the payment solutions need to be adoptable by everyone. A good example is actually what I'm using here is a PayPal. Um, Having an e-money account where you can actually top up from any account source, that's kind of easy to adopt by everyone. Maybe not so adopted in Finland due to other reasons in the history here, compared to maybe, for example, Siirto, which is just partially used by people because of it's not provided for everyone at the moment. Um, Secondly, it needs to scale universally, and the good part of the current infrastructure of in-store payments, NFC payments, those scale. So you can actually scale beyond geography and scale beyond different target groups. And again, maybe a good example of what's not so much scaling in the Finnish market is the teleoperator payments. Very niche, very specific. But if you want to build universal payments, you need to be scalable. Thirdly, it needs to cover 360 of a payment needs. And this is something that we are also now in Vipps MobilePay more and more looking at our strategy going forwards. Good example of that is actually the banks. I think that they present at the moment in the account payment the only kind of 360 payment, so you can actually do all the needs that the consumer needs to do when it comes to payments. So being able to pay bills, being able to pay in store somewhat online, being able to transfer money to your friend. Those four use cases need to be covered. Um, and finally, it needs to be agnostic of a funding source. And this is maybe the latest development with the rise of BNPL and credit without actually having a plastic tied to it. It's also related to the emerging trends, like, for example, crypto being supported as a payment source, maybe through then traditional elements like card, like, for example, what Revolut has been doing. And again, good comparison is if we look at mobile payments, Swish in Sweden has been mainly based on accounts. Of course, they are now also moving into other funding sources going forward. Um, if we then look at some of the general trends and touching a little bit some of the same topics as Tommy touched, but more looking at it from, let's say, typical McKinsey model of looking at the horizons towards the future. So where are we at actually now? What's cooking at the moment? And what's also something that I'm excited about, obviously, is the third party tap to pay. So all the providers now who's been working in payments can actually start using the NFC even if you're not Apple, because that was locked, and that will change the in-store landscape of payments this year and the upcoming 2 years quite rapidly. And we've seen that with our own launch, for example, in Norway, where we first in the world launched as a third-party wallet tap to pay in December last year. Obviously, we're seeing the MPOS trend. So also the mobiles becoming a payment terminals themselves, and that will be a big trend for especially for the micro and SME. And obviously, Visa and Mastercard are both pushing very hard on getting click to pay to market to enhance the experience of card payments in the online space. So that's happening. And obviously, on the regulation side, there's a lot of stuff. Payments is a very regulated business, and you can also then look at it, what's happening on the market and what's happening on driven by the regulation. And there, of course, the current trends at the moment is related to MiCA, so crypto assets. Fear looking at the EV charging and terminal implementations there, and obviously Dora is probably familiar to all of you, so I'm not going to go through there. Within this year, what I expect to happen is we'll move to tap to pay, also in-store payments using account as a funding source. And that will be a big trend. It will provide cost benefit for merchants, which they've been asking for past 5 to 10 years. I think that will be one of the biggest things. The other thing which we're also seeing is that BNPL will become an integrated funding source into the existing mobile wallets. And this is something that, for example, Klarna is pushing towards Apple. We as a company are looking at this. We've also made a decision that we'll not make our own BNPL, so we're partnering with the banks and third-party providers by ourselves as well. Obviously, digital receipts, having that integrated experience. Good example of here, of course, is one of the Finnish startups, Receipt Hero. Yes. Happy to mention that. I think you're leading on that front, and happy to see that being more and more integrated into the setups. And we'll see instant. I think Instant at the moment, especially in mobile payments, it's been kind of the norm under the hood, but now we'll actually have all the transactions flowing instant when we come to October, both sending and receiving, and that will help out in terms of building payments for sure. If we then look at a little bit further, what's going to be happening there? So I expect that the A2A adoption will continue. We've seen that in the online space, obviously with the PSD2 in 2018, and that kind of fueling the use of bank buttons, especially in the Finnish market in online commerce. So that will continue because everybody's looking at how to make cost efficiency, similarly in payments as in other industries at the moment. So that will keep driving. We'll probably see some new X space. It's interesting to see if Elon will get his shit together in terms of X and get it to Europe as well. He might. So we might see some new players there. We are actually, as a Vips MobilePay, we're an active member of EMSA, which is the European Mobile Payments Association. So we will definitely see more cross-border cooperation. Good example of that is now Revolut and Blick working together, for example, a little bit. And we as well, we're looking at how could we actually serve some of those countries that are important for Finns. Like Spain could be a good example. If you're traveling to your holiday home at Spain, how you can actually use the wallets that you used to having here to use them on there as well. Obviously, the next 2 years actually is going to be, I wouldn't say the golden age, but for again for a time, 2018 was quite active time period. Then we had a little bit of a slow time in payments, to be frank. But now, in next 2 years, there's going to be boatload of regulation that will actually create new opportunities when it comes to PSD3, PSR, FIDA, widening the use of potential use of open banking into different types of accounts. We have the CCD2, which is regulating the BNPL and the credit line space, and the digital identity landscape as well is changing at the same time. So there's very many kind of different regulations coming into play here. We as well, we're looking at digital identity. How can that be integrated potentially to a payment wallet? How does that change the landscape in Finland? You know, the strong customer authentication landscape is very fragmented. Every bank having their own. Do we get one single ID that you could actually use across banks? That would be awesome. I lived a couple of years in Estonia when I was working in Luminor. There was a good setup, for example, in the Estonian government set up there, which just purely simplifies things in many ways. Obviously, in the 5 year range, then looking at potentially EU-wide wallet with the digital euro. Request to pay. I would hope actually for Sami and the guys working have been doing good work in the planning cone that would happen earlier. But this is a little bit of a pessimistic approach because of the fact that there's so many things now in the 2 years range coming, which is mandatory to put in place by the banks. So referring back to what Tommy mentioned as well, there are things that are optional and there are things that are mandatory, and often because capacity is an issue on the banks to do these things, then the mandatory stuff gets upfront. But then looking at the three scenarios and diving deeper on that, obviously I'm looking at it from the perspective that, okay, what if there isn't no innovation at all? So what happens to the market going forward? If there's an incremental innovation, like good example of a Coke, the same stuff more or less in a different colors. And then obviously, what's a disruptive innovation? So if you have Netflix, for example, eating blockbusters, and what would that actually mean? And then I'm looking at this from the four perspectives that I mentioned. So in-store, online, invoice and bill payments, and peer-to-peer payments. Those kind of four, the most common use cases that you see. Now, obviously, in the in-store landscape, we've seen already tap to pay using phone taking market share, and probably Kai might mention about it in the next presentation. But that will, of course, continue. So we've seen the first steps. If we look at the Danish market, for example, 30% of the retail payments is already done using mobile phone. In Finland, maybe that's half of that. And I know that in Norway, where we're also present, that's just starting there. Obviously, wearables becoming slowly a fashion item. I'm actually wondering when does actually Aura get to put a payment capability into their ring, because they would already have quite many rings out there. Would probably make sense, if technically possible. Um, and then, as I mentioned, MPOS already taking place on the acceptance side. Uh, because of the fact that in Finland, and if we are in Finland, you have to talk about bank buttons and direct or credit transfers directly from the account. That, of course, has currently a 50% market share. If you look at e-com and online commerce, still roughly that. And the trend will continue. It's quite efficient already. And unfortunately, a lot of the bank earnings has gone because of the PSD2 there. But the use will kind of continue going forwards. Other than that, I actually think that mobile wallets will continue to grow rapidly as they have, and we've seen in the numbers, and will probably overtake all the other payment methods in the market. Maybe bank buttons will continue in the near future to be the one if we continue as is. I did mention already a little bit that there will be a consolidation. There will be a consolidation of mobile wallet actors, BNPL, and payment service providers. For the payment service providers, the local consolidation in Finland has already been done. That was done in the last 5 years, more or less, or even before. But this is more of a consolidation across border on the companies. And click to pay will become the standard for cards in terms of the usage in a browser and app payments perspective. That will, of course, help banks to maintain some of the earnings that they have on the card issuing side, because the experience is better with click to pay than it is currently, and I think that will improve the card usage at least marginally. In terms of bill payments, as you might know, Finvoice is the go-to standard still in Finland, and of course that kind of safeguards a lot of the bank's earnings, and that if nothing happens, that will continue to be the case, and most bills will be paid through the mobile banking apps as such. And finally, for peer-to-peer, I think we are probably roughly taking 40% of the peer-to-peer transactions for it already in the Finnish market. The number might be a little bit higher if I look at Denmark or Norway, and I think that will continue because it's just more easy to pay to your friend using a phone number than it is to remember that IBAN number either by heart or by asking in the WhatsApp. Convenience really drives there. If then looking at kind of innovation and the kind of the small steps, incremental steps going forward, as I said, account payments using NFC. So be accustomed to within a year, for sure, a year or two, to make a payment in the in-store directly from your account, not from your card. Again, digital receipts coming in, and I talked about a little bit the wearables part already. In the online space, and we've seen this through Klarna, and obviously we do have as well MobilePay as our own product on this. We see that the kind of the one-click checkout, so integrating payments into shipping into a login, so handling the identity, this will more and more become a standard. And that will grow, I think, if we look at from an innovation perspective. So instead of merchants getting 3 different vendors, this will be bundled up into a one product. What I'm interested to see actually on the BNPL space is real-time BNPL comparison. At the moment, there's a still quite fragmented field of BNPL, and we do have a real-time comparison, but that's outside of the e-com context, so it hasn't been applied to e-commerce directly. So if you go shopping something, you put in your Social Security, and you can actually get the offers for BNPL from multiple vendors at the same time. And the use of BNPLs as a funding source within the wallets, you'll probably see that as well. In terms of bill payments, I'm expecting that if the change in the regulation goes through, the potential kind of incremental step, of course, is the growth of Kivra and Posti apps, potentially existing wallets as well, to challenge banks in terms of a user's interface to pay the bills on a daily basis. Open banking also provides some of the toolbox. We, for example, do have bill payments supported in our app in Norway, where users can pay e-factura bills directly using a Vipps app. I could see the same trend happening in Denmark or Finland going forward. And in the peer-to-peer, obviously at the moment there's a project by Bank of Finland called Pikis, and we might see new solutions emerging from that. That's still on the drawing board, and that will hopefully get more fleshed out within the next year. We as well, as a Vipps MobilePay, are participating on the work. And I expect as well start to seeing interoperability between the wallets within EU to actually be able to send to your friend in Spain or in France or in Germany. And there's been pilots within the DACH area already for this. And again, incremental innovation, making some of the existing capabilities better or expanding them across borders. If we then talk about more of a disruptive innovation and more like things that I would like to see, these are unfortunately quite hard to achieve in the payments in many cases because it will require cooperation of a multiple stakeholders because of how the value network is created in payments. And I'm looking a lot towards Kai because he's on a hot seat in terms of potentially being able to drive this type of innovation. And the reason for that, for at least for me, is that the merchant side of payments is always harder to build than the user side. So if you can get the merchant side ready, then the users will come because of the often the convenience factor. And that, for example, relates to adoption of a new technology such as ultrasound, which maybe makes the acceptance devices a little bit more lighter on the acceptance side. Potentially biometrics, which have been tried on this market, at least by some of the banks back in the day and some of the people in the room as well. Potentially either using face or other biometrics. But that the big investment or part of that is actually on the merchant side and on the acquiring side to be able to facilitate that. And then potentially you can tie that into a mobile wallet who can act as a place to tie those things together. And potentially, of course, automated self-service. Now that AI is also improving and the cost is going down, we see these type of capabilities mainly on the merchant side of things. So actually being able to just handle the payment through the wallet on the background and just breeze through the store without actually going through the payment terminal at all. In terms of online payments, and this is something that I'm also discussing with some of the Finnish crypto providers, and I see that some of the other PSPs in the European level are already kind of preparing is crypto becoming an actual funding source in a daily life payments. And this is something that might actually be one of those things that would be more potential to happen now that Trump is being elected. As you might read from the news, I think he's very pro crypto, at least in the US, and we'll see how that then lands towards Europe and the European regulation going forwards. Obviously, the digital identity, that will be a key thing on a longer term, potentially coupled or decoupled from digital euro, and then depending on if it will be its own wallet restricted by access to third parties, or how does that actually play out? There's still plans on that as well, which is a little bit uncertain yet. In terms of bill payments, I think Sami and Pine and Cohen have been doing a good work on the request to pay side. Again, very happy and interested in seeing that and those efforts taken forward. But of course, it will require that the banks will adopt the necessary infrastructure to be used, and looking at potentially replacing or looking at the next evolution of a Finvoice, which, if I recall right, is like 20 or so years old originally already on this side of things. And in terms of person to person, obviously looking at a Europe-wide network. So you being able to actually transfer money across Europe seamlessly using your phone numbers and potentially mobile wallets or mobile banking apps going forwards. And that will require innovation because, as we saw, for example, with P27, that's not easy thing to build up for sure going forwards. From my own perspective, my bet is on the incremental one. um, at least in major parts. And the reason for that is that, as I said, I see that the current value chain is quite complex, and some of the things on the long term will be hard to put out, and they are very regulation dependent. On a short run, I think this will be run by price from the merchant side. That's a big driver at the moment. We'll see regulation, of course, pushing, and the convenience from the user side in terms of what's going to happen on this. Now, finally, the third part of the presentation. So, what are the kind of the key learnings from our company as a corporate scale up, what you would call it, maybe on this space? One of the first things I know that when we're talking about payments, we're talking about complex ecosystems of value. And we like to internally in Vips MobilePay say that you need to focus on building skateboards instead of cars, because it's a lot harder to build a car than it is a skateboard. So you need to start small and iterate many times, and sequentially then build that into a car at a later point. But you always need to start from small. And what is the smallest thing that you can actually build to get you from, in this case, A to B, if we're talking transportation. But the same thing, of course, applies to payments going forwards. The other part, and that's coming from my own experience of working in a retail bank for almost 10 years, is basically get your payments team as far away from the bank as you can, to be frank. So try to create as a safe environment instead of actually inflicting the team with the risk aversion, which is quite common in a bank. If you want to be an innovative payments company, you need to act and be more like a tech company or SaaS company. And that means that you need to be able to test, take risks, and not actually abide to every risk policy in the company. And that's easier said than done, because even, for example, with MobilePay, which only at the moment, after the replatforming, we don't have any ties to our owner banks. We do have a board, but even in that case, it's more complex, and because we are quite self-dependent or self-reliant at the moment, but we still need to abide on some of the things. I think as a third point, and I think here especially in Vips MobilePay, we have succeeded quite well, which is to build the actual growth engine into the product. So building those network effects, because payments is a mass transaction industry. The bigger volume and the bigger impact you have, the better success chances you actually have. So if you build those network effects into the product, so which will help you to grow and create that position instead of then relying on outside campaigns and then marketing, that's always better. And that's been one of the successes of Vips MobilePay in terms of getting that user adoption, what we have as strong in the Nordics. And I think payments and finance industry differentiates from other industries in one specific point, which is we're coming back towards the complexity of the value chain. And traditionally, if you look at the industries, you might not partner up with your competitors. But if we're working in payments, you most likely need to do it, and it's probably your benefit as well in many cases. And this of course comes from how the industry has been structured around a four-corner model, and how the vendors and how the setups work. So things are intertwined and laid on top of each other. And as a final thing, I think this is more looking at, especially from the funding source perspective. If you want to build anything new for payments, there to really start from a blank slate to actually think about what would the future look like, and not so much rely on the existing structures that have been placed in the past 10 years. I think those will come when you grow and mature your idea. But really, if you start from a four-corner model, you will end up being within the four-corner model as well. So there to really think that how you could do these things in a different way. So that's I think my full set. Thank you very much for the time. And I think we don't have time for questions, I think, in this case. So thank you very much.